Hello class 10. We will resume our study of excretory system from the blood supply to the kidney tubules. Now, each renal artery branches and rebranches several times to give rise to arterioles, that is small branches. Each such arteriole enters a Bowman's capsule under the name of afferent arteriole. This afferent arteriole breaks into a number of capillaries which form a knot-like mass known as glomerulus that closely fits inside the Bowman's capsule. Now, we'll look into a diagram for this. See this diagram. Here we can see that when the renal artery is branching and rebranching, it is forming a much thinner form of blood vessel which we call as arteriole, and this afferent arteriole is entering into the Bowman's capsule and it is breaking itself into a number of capillaries which is forming a knot-like structure which is known as, this is the knot-like structure which is known as glomerulus. Okay. The reuniting capillaries of the glomerulus form the efferent arteriole. Again, here in this knot, the arteriole is reuniting to form the efferent arteriole with which it is coming out. So you have to remember that afferent arteriole is entering and efferent arteriole is coming out from the Bowman's capsule. The efferent arteriole, after emerging from the Bowman's capsule, runs a short distance and breaks up into a secondary capillary network known as vasa recta, which surrounds the renal tubule and rejoins to form a vein. Now, this thing I have said you in the last class, that the capillary network which is entangling the whole nephron is known as vasa recta. Now, I'll show you again the diagram. See, this is the diagram, and as you can see that efferent arteriole is coming out and it is breaking itself into capillary networks which is entangling the whole nephron. This is known as the vasa recta. I hope it's clear. By uniting again and again with other veins of the kidney, it ultimately forms the renal vein, which leaves the kidney at the median surface to pour the blood into the posterior vena cava. So, then it reunites again and again to form the vein of the kidney, which is known as renal vein. So, the renal artery is entering the kidney, the respective kidneys, and the renal vein leaves the kidney. Clear? You must keep that in mind, that renal artery is forming the afferent arteriole and the efferent arteriole, after forming the vasa recta, reuniting to form the renal vein. Now, the process of urine formation involves 3 steps: ultrafiltration, reabsorption of certain important materials, and secretion. Now, ultrafiltration. In the previous class, I was saying that why the afferent arteriole is thicker, as you can see in this diagram, and efferent arteriole is thinner. Now, this thick and thin diameter brings about a great pressure inside the glomerulus. The reason for this greater pressure is that the efferent arteriole is narrower than the afferent. This high pressure, known as hydrostatic pressure, causes the liquid part of the blood to filter out from the glomerulus into the renal tubule. That is actually the urine which is excreted out. Clear? So, this high pressure is actually creating that pressure to bring out the watery part from the blood, which will be filtrated and which will be going out from our body. This filtration under extraordinary force is called ultrafiltration. This is the definition. During ultrafiltration, almost all the liquid part of the blood comes out of the glomerulus and passes into the funnel-shaped cavity of the Bowman's capsule. Okay, and this liquid part consists of plasma along with most organic and inorganic substances. Clear? This fluid that is entering the renal tubule, we call it as glomerular filtrate. Now, what is the composition of glomerular filtrate? The glomerular filtrate consists of water, urea, salts, glucose and plasma solutes. And here you mark urea because at the first in the chapter I have discussed about urea, which is the nitrogenous metabolic waste. The thicker part of the blood left behind in the glomerulus after filtration, namely the two kinds of corpuscles, that means red RBC and WBC, proteins and other large molecules which are carried forward through the efferent arteriole. Thus, the blood proceeding away from the glomerulus is relatively thick. That means the blood which is entering inside the Bowman's capsule through afferent arteriole is much thinner because it consists of the watery part, and the blood which is leaving through efferent arteriole is much thicker because it is without any water, only consisting of corpuscles, proteins and large molecules. So definitely that is more thicker, which is surrounding the whole nephron part, that is the vasa recta. Vasa recta is carrying that thicker part of the blood which is entangling the whole nephron. Clear? Now next is reabsorption. Reabsorption means some important materials are to be reabsorbed which was coming out by the hydrostatic pressure. The glomerular filtrate entering the renal tubule is not urine. It is an extremely dilute solution containing a lot of usable materials, including glucose and some salts like that of sodium. You know, sodium is very important for us because we have already read in our nervous system that the sodium and potassium are very important salts for our nerve impulses. As the filtrate passes down the tubule, much of the water is reabsorbed together with the usable substance. That means if we take out all the water from our body, then that means we are dehydrating ourselves, right? So we need to excrete out only the excess water. That is why much of the water is reabsorbed, because you know water is very much essential for our body, along with the usable substances like glucose and sodium which has gone out due to the hydrostatic pressure. Clear? But their reabsorption is only to the extent that the normal concentration of the blood is not disturbed. This is called selective absorption. Why selective? Because selectively the things are reabsorbed back into the blood. Right? Certain substances like potassium and a large number of foreign chemicals, including drugs means medicines like penicillin, are passed into the forming urine in the DCT, the distal convoluted tubule. This passage involves the activity of the cells of the tubular wall, and hence it is called the tubular secretion. That means potassium, along with excess potassium is also very harmful for our body, for the nerve impulses to be conducted properly. So if excess potassium is there, and also the drugs, the medicines which we are taking inside, those things are secreted at the DCT part of the nephron, and that is known as tubular secretion. Clear? So these three phenomenon, ultrafiltration, selective reabsorption and tubular secretion, sums up the urine formation process. Clear? The filtrate left after reabsorption and tubular secretion is called urine. That means the filtrate which is coming out from our body, or which we are excreting out, is after the reabsorption of usable substances and after the secretion of the tubular part, that is the DCT. Clear? Now this chart is very important because it's a summary, it's the gist of what are the parts of the nephron and what are their activities, and which things are reabsorbed, which things are secreted, which things are ultrafiltrated. So please go through this chart. It's very important chart. Now, final urine passes into the collecting ducts to the pelvis and through the ureter into the urinary bladder by the waves of constriction in the ureters, that is ureteral peristalsis. You have read in your earlier classes peristalsis in the digestive tract. Peristalsis means it's a wave of contraction and relaxation, is a wave of pushing down something. So here peristalsis we can find in the ureter. Urine is expelled from the urinary bladder through the urethra by relaxation of the urinary bladder into sphincter muscles located at the opening of the urinary bladder into the urethra under impulse from the nervous system. Such a process is called micturition. Last day also I was talking about the sphincter muscle, which are the circular muscles present just at the opening of the bladder, because it actually controls and regulates the micturition process, the act of urination, because it is the impulse which comes out from our brain and then only we can urinate. Okay. Now, constituents of urine. The normal human urine consists of about 95% of water, that we all know, I hope, and 5% of solid wastes. Now, what are these solid wastes? Just see this chart. Here we can get what are the things which are going out through the urine. Organic, urea, creatinine, uric acid, and some other things. And inorganic, sodium chloride, potassium chloride, sulfuric acid, ammonia, and some other things. So definitely this chart is also very important to get a rough idea what are the constituents of urine. Now, what are the physical properties of urine? Color, yellow, we know that. Volume, 1 to 1.5 liters per day, but it may vary, according to the season, according to, man to man it varies. pH, it is slightly acidic, pH equals to 6, 5 to 8 it can also vary. Odor, ammonia-like due to bacterial activity, and the smell of the urine is very strong, and specific gravity 1.003 to 1.035. Now, there are some abnormal constituents in urine, like blood cells. Definitely we know urine cannot excrete out blood cells. We cannot see blood in our urine, but if we see it, then that is something very abnormal, and we call it as hematuria. In this, the blood passes with the urine, obviously due to some infection in the urinary tract, or maybe it is a case of kidney stone or kidney tumor, which is very serious condition. Glucose or glycosuria, we call it as glycosuria because when the diabetes mellitus, we have read in the endocrine system that when insulin is not secreted properly, then diabetes mellitus occurs, and in those diabetes patients, the excess glucose passes with the urine, the glucose crystals, and we call that that condition is glycosuria. Normally it is saltish. When sweetish, the condition may be due to sugar diabetes. Another one, if the urine is tasteless, it is due to much water in the urine, a condition called diabetes insipidus. This also we have read in our endocrine system. Due to the insufficient vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone, we get this disease, diabetes insipidus, right? Number 3, albumin. Albumin, is a very high protein. Due to very high blood pressure or due to bacterial infection, with the permeability of Bowman's capsule membrane increases, and that is why the albumin comes out. Bile pigments, generally if somebody is suffering from jaundice, then it may happen, or liver cirrhosis because of taking of much very high amount of alcohol. Sometimes liver cirrhosis occurs, due to which the person dies also. In that case also bile pigments can be excreted out through the urine. Now, this regulation of urine output, the pituitary gland is very important in this case. Concentration of the urine by water reabsorption is controlled by antidiuretic hormones secreted by the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland. This we have read in our endocrine system. And if this ADH secretion is reduced, there is an increased production of urine, and this is called diuresis. Because excess amount of water is going out from our body because of the less secretion of vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone. So what happens, we suffer from dehydration. Substances that increase the formation of urine are called diuretics. Example, liquid diets, tea, coffee, and alcohol. This is a very small portion, but is a very important portion. And here in this particular paragraph, we are getting how endocrine system is related to the excretory system. So definitely you can get question from here. The last part of this chapter is artificial kidney. This is a very important part because kidney failure, I hope you all have heard about it. And if the kidney failure happens, then it is very difficult for the person to stay alive. We have two kidneys, so definitely if one kidney is not working, then the other kidney will work for that. But if both the kidneys are failing at the same time, then it is a very tough situation for the patient, and it's very expensive process. But what happens if both the kidneys fail? If one kidney is damaged or removed, the other kidney alone is sufficient for the excretory needs to lead a normal life. But failure of both the kidneys would lead to death. In that case, artificial kidney is known as a dialysis machine. The patient's blood is led from the radial artery in his arm through the machine, where the urea and excess salts are removed and purified, and that purified blood is returned to the vein in the same arm. But it's a very, very painful situation, and it's a very painful process also. In cases of permanent damage to the kidneys, dialysis is to be repeated for about 12 hours twice a week. So it is really a tough situation, and you must know that dialyzer or the dialysis machine is very expensive, and also nothing artificial can work as a natural phenomenon. So definitely natural excretion is far better, but this is the alternative way. Clear? So this thing you have to remember regarding the artificial kidney. Okay students, so we are done with excretory system chapter. Please go through the chapter properly, and there are various small things which you have to learn, and the tables which I have said you, those tables are also very important. Please go through the chapter properly. If you have any problem, you can come up in the comment box. Thank you.